Boy, what an exciting day do we have today. We're going to talk about functions. And functions are a modular way of breaking up your code. Functions are reusable, or at least they can be if you write your code the way it should be written. And functions will allow us to not just have long lines of code copying and pasting junk. It'll make things more reasonable and more reusable. Okay, rule of thumb: if you're copying and pasting code, you're doing it wrong. If you're copying and pasting to get something to work, you are not writing code the best way. Now, maybe you don't know how to make it better yet, and that's fine. You can keep doing that. But I just want you to know that you should feel a little dagger in your heart every time you copy and paste code, something inside you saying that this is not right. It doesn't feel good. And that's my dagger. It's my virtual dagger coming all the way from over here in California, stabbing you in the heart, telling you not to write code like that. So functions are going to help us not do that, okay? Okay? It's also one more principle, one more thing, and then I'll get off my soapbox. If you're copying and pasting code, you are violating the principle of DRY, D-R-Y. Don't repeat yourself, okay? That's another thing you can remember. If you're repeating yourself, you're probably doing it wrong, or there's a better way to do it. And again, you don't have to know the answer, but just know because you feel that virtual dagger in your heart coming straight from me, and I'm a nice enough guy to stab you in the heart. So here we go. Functions. Let me comment out this stuff here. Command or control / and function. So what's a function when we use it? Well, I have a perfect example. Okay, let's show you the bad way first so you can understand. Make this bigger here. Okay, let's say that we want to get the area of a square. Okay, so let's say length 1 equals 15, or let's say a rectangle, whatever. Var length width 1 equals 10. So you know area is length times width. Okay, so var area 1 equals length 1 times width 1. Let's just console.log and make sure our code's working. Area 1. Save it. 150. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, great. Well, what about another? We have a program with shapes. Okay, we're working with lots of shapes in this program, like Photoshop. Well, we can drag and drop different shapes in there, and we need to be able to calculate the area, the length, and the width, so we can get the area, know how much space to fill in when we use the paint bucket tool. Oh, you're starting to see all those different things that are going on in programs you probably never thought about. So var length 2. Okay, we have a different rectangle now, right? So, let's say 12 times 22. Oh, what? Times, you weirdo? What am I doing? Var length or width 2 equals 14. Okay, and var area 2 equals length 2 time. I'm already getting tired writing this repeating code. You see how we're repeating here? You may be tempted to do this, but just know that it's not right. It could be much better. Okay. And so let's console.log area 2. It's probably going to give us a number if our code's working. Okay, 150, 168. This is great. Now, and it's working, sure. But this is not really reusable, and it's very specific length and width and area 1 and width 1, and there's a better way. And so we're going to use a function to refactor our code. We're going to make our code mo better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a function here. We're going to say function, and we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call this area. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to put in 2 parameters for length and for width. Okay, and a parameter looks like this: length and width. Now, these parameters here, this is going to get a little bit confusing here. Okay, if you're new to coding, but we'll get through it. Length and width. Okay, you notice I don't have these anywhere else on the page, right? These are new variables. I'm not putting the var keyword in front of them. Okay, these are parameters, but they're variables. They're not being used yet, but they will be. Okay, you can name these whatever you want. Of course, I could say L and W, but it's not very descriptive for other programmers who might be looking at our code. Length and width. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say return length times width. Okay, so function. We've created a function here by defining the function keyword. Then we've given it a name. Okay, and we've said length and width. There's a comma in here. So we have two parameters, okay? Length and width. And then we're returning something, length times width. Now, this is probably craziness to you if you've never coded before. So let's push through here and see how it actually works. So what I can do is I can say var. So I'm going to comment out this junk over here. This is old junk. We're going to say var area1, okay, equals, we're going to call the area function, and we're going to pass in some values here. So we'll say 10, 15. And then what we're going to do is we're going to console.log area1. Let's save this and run it. 150. So it worked. What's going on here? Okay. This is what's going on. So this is a variable. Like before, we had a variable for area1. So that is exactly the same. Okay. But the difference here is we're saying it is equal to area. So we created a function called area. Again, this could be called anything we want. ZZZ, and then I would say ZZZ. But of course, that's stupid. So area, I'm calling a function. This is how you call a function. You call it by saying its name, area. And then we're passing in numbers here. Well, a 10 and a 15. So this is what's happening. When we pass the 10, okay, I want you to pretend that this value is being dropped in a bucket, a variable called length. We talked about buckets in the past. So this 10 is now being dropped into this function right here, and we're giving it a new name, okay? We're giving this 10 a new name, and we're calling it length. And we're giving this 15 a new name, and we're calling it width. Notice how there's a comma here and a comma here. So it's exactly the same. Whatever you put in the order that you put it in, is going to be shoved in these variables, okay? These are variables. At the time of this function here, they're not being used yet, but once you drop data into them, like so, they are now inside of your function, and your function can use them. Oh, interesting. Interesting, okay. That's kind of cool, right? So var area1 equals area. Okay, this is looking good. And then what are we doing here? We're returning something, okay? We're saying take the length, so take the 10, multiply it by the 15, and then return it into whoever's calling it. So it's going to calculate this, which is 150, and then it's going to return it, like return to sender, okay? It's going to take this and assign it with the equal sign right back here into the area, okay? So you drop things in over here inside the parentheses, it does its stuff, and then it can return something from the function. It's going to come out of the function and return the result right here into area 1 via the equal sign. So this equal sign, it's calling the function again. You're calling the function, it's doing an operation, and it's returning the result and storing it in this variable. Now, this may take some time for you to understand if you're new to coding. And I keep saying that, but it will. Like, functions are often something that people struggle with a lot because they can't quite understand how are the numbers going from right here to right here and what's going on. But again, last time I'll say this. You're taking it, whatever you drop in here, you're dropping it into a bucket with a new name and making it accessible inside of the function. And this one as well too, okay? We don't have to say length or width down here. This is just the data we pass in, and we give it a new name in the function. And we're returning it here. So console.log area1, that works. Now, what's the advantage of this? Well, let me show you. Now, instead of having all these crazy lines of code, say var. In fact, we'll make it even better. Let's pretend we're in Photoshop, okay? And you know how there's a shape tool, you can make a bunch of shapes. Let's say we're building a bunch of squares. We're making some abstract design, and it's going to be very cool. It has lots of squares, and we need to store all that. So we're going to say var. Let's call this rectangles, okay? And we're going to make it an array. Oh, this is kind of cool. And then what we can do is something really fun, okay? We can say rectangles.push. Remember, that's how you push something into an array. And then we can just actually take this code inside of here and put it inside of the push. So we have just pushed up a new shape, a new area. And this, in fact, this should be rectangle areas, or rectangles areas, yeah. So rectangles, I better change it. Rectangles areas dot push. And then we're calling the array. Nothing's changed. We're still calling the function, except we're just putting it right here inside the push. So we don't have to have all those variables, which is really cool. Push, this is interesting. Push is also a function, okay? It's the function of an array. An array has a function called push. And notice how the push also has parentheses, just like our area function does. And it takes one parameter right here, okay? the first parameter. So it's actually taking the result of this and pushing it into the array, which is kind of cool. And we can do it again, rectangles areas dot push. And now we're making some really cool, our code is so reusable, our functions, so we can push in new stuff. We could say 14 and 2. And we could just do this all day long. Rectangles dot push area, and we'll say 4, comma 5. And by the way, if you want to go to the front of the line, it's command or control to the left or command and control to the right. Pretty cool. And now what I want to do is just console.log the rectangle areas and see console.log and rectangle areas, the whole entire array. Now that's another thing. We talked about this before. Console.log, well, we're grabbing the console from the browser and we're calling a function on it as well using dot and then log. And log is a function. And look at this. Log has its own parameter, okay? A parenthesis, and a parameter, whatever you want to put in there to print. So let's go ahead and save this and run it. Oops, I broke something. Oh, area 1. Oh, I forgot to comment this out. There we go. Okay, so we printed the array of areas. 150, 28, and 20. Is that correct? 14 times 2 is 28. 5 times 4 is 20. So really cool, right? So what have we done here? We've actually reused a function. Okay, we've made a function that can do something over and over again. It's not really ugly like this, right? Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines of code to get 2 areas. Also, what would happen if we accidentally, we mistype this like this with a minus? That's every time we have to rewrite that code, it's a potential to make a syntax error because we are, or not a syntax error, a logical error, because we have to hand type things, human error. But if we write it once, it can be reused multiple times. So we went from 6 lines of code for 2 things to 3 lines of code for 3 things, which is really cool. We put it here in the rectangles areas array. Okay, is this starting to make sense? This is pretty cool. Let me give you another example of working with functions. Okay, let's go back to the bank account balance scenario. All right, so var bank balance equals 500. Okay, and let's create a function called make transaction. So what we want to do, what I like to do is finish defining the function. Before I put parameters in, I like to just put the closing parentheses or the closing curly brace, the opening curly brace, as well as the parentheses. Now, make transaction. Let's think about the logic. Before we even write code, it's always important to think about what you're doing. So pretend this is a web app you're building for a bank, okay? You want to make a transaction. The card's about to be swiped. So what do we need to know to make a transaction? Well, we need to know how much the incoming transaction is for, okay? And maybe we actually need the bank balance as well too. We need to know what the account balance is, and we could pass it in, but we don't have to as well too, because we do have it right here, and we'll talk about that too. There's a lot that goes into this. So we know we're going to need the product price though, right? So price of product, okay, or price of sell, okay, of sell, whatever. Okay, so we name it what we think makes sense. Well, how would we do this? So make transaction. So the goal is to deduct the balance from the price of the sell if we can. Okay, so if price of sell is less than or equal to bank balance, okay, we'll say bank balance minus equals, we got to adjust the balance, price of sell, we've done this before, and then console.log purchase successful. So this would probably be some very complex code that sends data back to, Walmart or Target or wherever you're shopping when you swipe your card and saying, hey, let's process the payment. So purchase successful. So we just sent it back to the retailer saying it was successful, and now they can check out of the store. Otherwise, console.log insufficient funds, okay? And this would be the message going back to the teller at the register saying your card was declined, okay? So make transaction, so we're going to deduct it, otherwise we're going to do this. Cool. So we've written the function once, okay? So let's just call the function now, make transaction. Let's say we want to buy, a pair of shoes. So it's $79. So that's one. And let's make a transaction again. And this time we're going to buy a candy bar. So we're going to say 232. Okay. Make transaction. And then, of course, our Netflix subscription, that's got to come out. So we're going to put $10, probably 45 cents because of taxes. Okay. So how cool is that? We're making 3 transactions with just 3 lines of code. This was all written once. We don't ever have to write this again, which is really cool. No more if, else's. That's only written once. That's the value of functions. It helps you to not repeat yourself. So what we're going to do is we'll print out the balance at every step of the way. Console.log bank balance. Okay. So we'll do it here just to make sure our function's correctly working. Okay. And let's go ahead and run the code. So $500 to start off with, purchase successful. So we bought something for $79. Now we have $421 left. Purchase successful, we bought the candy bar. Great. Now let's make a bigger purchase. Console.log. Okay. The bank balance. And this time we want to see, and we want to buy a Nintendo Switch, which of course is not available anywhere. So we had to get it on eBay, and I'm not too happy about it, but that's what we got to do. And so it was like $450 on eBay. Okay. So let's run the program and see what happens. So purchase, insufficient funds. Oh, we actually don't have enough money. That eBay seller is going to be mad because he already sent the product. Just kidding. It doesn't work like that. So, cool stuff, right? We made 4 transactions, and they did what they're supposed to do in every single case, and we only had to write the code once. Now, notice how in this case, okay, we're not returning anything. This function is performing an operation. It can see the bank account balance because it's up here above it, okay? And so it knows it's subtracting. So we don't actually need a return statement. It's optional, okay? You can have them or you don't have them. It doesn't matter. And then up here, of course, we do have the return statement where it's actually returning a value. Pretty cool stuff. So that's functions. I mean, you can have as many parameters in functions as you want, which I think is pretty cool. And there's also one more way of storing functions. Right now here it's in the, we're just saying function and we're giving it a name, but we can also store them in variables. We can say var, and let's call this transaction equals, and then what we just do is we say function, and if we're making the same one, right? So price of sale, okay? And then you can actually define your function in here, like so, and it's now stored in a variable, which is interesting, right? You're like, what is going on here? You're storing this in a variable? This is crazy madness. Notice how we don't put the name here after function in this case. We just give it a variable name. And now if we want to call it, it's the exact same thing. We can just say transaction, all right? And we can put in, let's say $10. I think will be insufficient because we won't be insufficient because this transaction didn't go through. So that should be purchased. Purchase was successful. So same exact thing. Pretty cool, huh? If you're wondering, well, which one should I use? Well, it depends on the use case, okay? Let's say that we wanted to store all the operations in an array. Well, you can't store this in an array. It doesn't work like that, but you can store this, okay? So let's say we had a big app, okay, that had lots of functions. So that's var transaction. Let's say we had var print customer name equals function, and what it's going to do is it's going to take first and last name, and then that's fine. Console.log, we're going to print the first name, it's like a nice readable print, plus first plus last name plus last, okay? So print customer name. What's another thing that a banking app might have? var, apply for credit card. Those pop-ups that they never seem to get rid of. And then you apply for it and they're like, we don't want you. But why did you say I was pre-approved in the first place? Banks, apply for credit card equals function. Maybe it takes your credit score, okay, and your SOL, banks. and this would probably call some functions to process application, right? And then it would use the credit score and stuff. We didn't write the code. Who knows what that is? Now we've got 3 functions here. Now what we could do is we could have an array. So var bank operations, it's an array. And what we could do is we could say bank operations dot push, and we could push the transaction, and bank operations dot push print customer name, okay, and then bank operations dot push apply for credit card. And now we stored all the functions there in an array, so we can access them later on if we wanted to, and grab them out and put them there. This is probably more suited to store functions maybe in an object of some kind, which we haven't talked about yet. But as for right now, you can store these in an array for later use if you put the var keyword in front of it, and that's the point here. So we've talked about a lot of things here, okay? A lot of things. This is just scratching the surface. Functions, okay? They have a name, parameters, 1 or more. You can have as many as you want. You give them whatever the name you want, and then during the function, it uses those based on what you want it to be, and then you drop in the value. So whatever it is, a string, it could be a number, anything, any type of variable you can pass in there, and you're assuming you know what's going to be in there, price of sell. So you drop the 79 in here, for instance, and now it's now usable inside of your function. Okay. Go over this video again if you don't understand. It does take a little bit of practice, a little bit of work, but this will help you write reusable code that you can clean up your applications with, and you're not having to copy and paste things. So that's it for now. A lot to process, but you'll get there. Mark Price at devslopes.com. See you next time.